I am so delighted to be with you all. In these continued days of Easter, we celebrate the joy and hope of resurrection. And this evening, our theme has the potential to draw us deeper into the call to discipleship, to ponder how we lead in commitment to ourselves, to God, and to others with integrity and from a place of our truest being. I love where this theme lands within the curriculum and liturgically. The upper room has been an image that has really been at the forefront of my prayer the past couple of months. And so I'd invite you to take a moment to pause and to place yourself in the upper room, surrounded by your companions. Imagine the room. Try to enter the room. Notice its smells and its sounds. What does it look like? If you're struggling to come up with an image, maybe think of a space that has had deep meaning for your growth. This room holds a space of learning, of grappling with new ideas, disagreeing, right, with peers, feelings of uncertainty. It's a space of connection, of doubt, and of hiding. And yet it holds transformation and what is still yet to come. Now I'd invite you, if your eyes are closed, to open them. God invites us to look lovingly at our companions. Jesus says, "I am the vine, you are the branches. This is the fullness of the tree." How do you contribute to Holy Community? In what ways might God be inviting you to go deeper? I'm excited in a moment to pass it over to our presenter, Meg McNeill, our very own DC Coordinator. She brings a wealth of experience to our leadership conversation. Also, as a CLA alum, she has cultivated a real commitment to leadership that reflects Ignatian values, which she's going to talk about tonight. This sacred community of our workshop breakout groups has the potential to hold vulnerable conversations and community exploration of our themes. Though these groups are not intended to reflect the closeness of your cohorts, it's an important part of our formation, how we show up to the conversations and to one another. Accountability to the process creates space for God and allows us to discover newness and depth. So let's begin our time together. Meg, welcome and thank you. And as always, who are you most authentically tonight as you join us?
Thank you, Elise. I am authentically so excited. I'm excited to be with this group. I'm excited to dive into this topic. And I'm also aware that as I was thinking about the topic, as I was preparing for tonight, I noticed a tension with the concept. I noticed this sense of accountability, said about control and checklists. And part of me was sort of this, don't make me, a little bit of that tension I was feeling. And I was feeling myself kind of pushing back on that. So I'm acknowledging that as I come in today, that authentically, that's a place that I started. And at the same time, as I prayed about the topic, as I thought more, what I started to notice, and what I hope we can all notice together tonight, is accountability has so much more in it. And there's so much more breadth and possibility in some of the ways that Anna mentioned in our prayer that just open up the world and open up who we are and in our relationships and in our service. So excited to talk through this topic tonight. I think another reason that accountability shows up for me as a spot of tension is kind of as I think about my own leadership brand, let's say. So I know that the getting stuff done has served me really well, right? You give me some checklist of things, I will check the things. And that serves me in some areas of my life. And on the other hand, I want to be the kind of leader, and I strive to be the kind of leader who's in the messy work and who's striving for being part of hard conversations and who's showing up with care for my teams in a way that can't be measured on a checklist or a to-do item. So letting my desire to play in that space shape my leadership journey is kind of part of what what shows up for me as I think about this topic. So I think, as I'm kind of alluding to here, when I think about accountability, I started with a lens of like self-discipline. And that could be a starting point. And we might talk about places where that serves each of us. But the concept of accountability goes so much further. And it's really about making things happen, living as our authentic selves, and being who we're called to be. So let's dive in. Just some definitions here. Again, not to say this is a right way, not to say my way is a right way or that I'm, a scholar or expert of the topic, but just to give, kind of how I see some of these and share some examples. So adding to our debrief, and I think really echoing some of the themes y'all shared, accountability to self, for me, it means being honest with myself about the goals, values, strengths, weaknesses, and the needs of my truest and most authentic self. I loved Vanessa's note in that opening chat of like fully being the person God created me to be. And so what will this require? So self-awareness. Who am I? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Self-discipline. Some of those pieces you all mentioned. How do you keep the practices? How do you have that available? And self-care. How do you approach those not from the lens of perfectionism or make wrong, but from the perspective of giving grace, of believing in what's possible for yourself. And then this last one's a doozy, awareness of where and how I resist change. Humans, how we dislike change. And yet we also are called to do more, be more. And so noticing, and we could do, a whole session just on that topic. What are the ways of being in change or of finding those places where we do see something that we want to be aligned to, and we're not yet taking the action to be accountable to that. So that's one of those places where, for me, it moves into that challenge of what's the resistance to change that might be getting in the way. So in each of these three, I'll just call out sort of the plug, the reminder of all the content and context of our CLA journey that relate to this piece of the puzzle. So as it relates to accountability to self, emotional intelligence, right? The work that we started off with in the fall is a key element of knowing myself, where I am in the moment, where I am as a mood. And also the data around our saboteurs and our judge, right? Those are critical pieces to have that sense of my truest and authentic self, and where I might be out of integrity to those values. Also, the resources we've used around Clearness Committee, giving others the space to notice for themselves, to hear their inner wisdom. And the polarity mapping we did last time. I tend to lean more towards this pole. How do I know that for myself? And where might I be being called to accountability to notice the other and see the strengths of when that's used well? And then ongoing reflection. I mean, like a lot of you alluded to, the space of putting yourself into a program like this is a way that you're being accountable to yourself, and trying to continue in your leadership journey and your growth in these areas. So for me, I feel like I'm accountable to myself when I do what I say I will, when I skip the shoulds, and when I pause to seek clarity within. And, I think I get lots of practice every day. I see, this was alluded to in some of your comments as well. When I think about trying to stay aligned and disciplined and authentic across my different identities as a professional, as a wife, as a mom, as a friend, how am I, as we'll talk into commitments to community, how am I doing what I said I'd do? But even before that, how am I doing it in a way that is uniquely what I'm being called to do? So I think it's kind of the aspect of this is that it often shows up in places of tension. So where I'm asked to do something that's counter to who I'm being. And I'm not talking about like those big glaring, this is an ethics issue, or, this is, I mean, of course, those are a space to be in choice as well, of doing something that just feels, wrong, right? That's kind of one set of choices. But I'm really talking about the places where it's in tension with other commitments or other ways of being. So, like a cool, shiny new opportunity. Oh, somebody invited me to do this thing. That looks interesting. I know that is a danger word for me because I want to say yes, and I'm going to go down that rabbit hole, and it might be fun and interesting. But is that really what I'm being called to do, or is it a distraction of the moment? And can I decline it in order to stay focused and disciplined in my commitments? So it's not to say accountability means always saying no, but it probably also doesn't mean, for me, always saying yes. Pivoting over to accountability to, and I'll add with God. So I see this one around living authentically in relationship and conversation with God, and intentionally labeling it with the to and the with, seeing that the to for me was showing up as I'm kind of thinking about this and chewing on this to prepare for tonight, acknowledging that my life is a gift and that I have a responsibility and an invitation to use it well. I love the comments that many of you used around grace and around trusting in God's grace, God's mercy, and being grateful for the abundance and the challenges of my life. And then when I think about that with God, it's aligning my actions with God's will, with my purpose, and being curious about and faithful to my vocation and my mission. And when I'm living authentically in relationship with God, I can act, and we'll get into this with community, from the sense of justice, rooted in my faith, rooted in my relationship with God. And a phrase that came up here is this element of co-creating with God. And so when we're co-creators with God, I mean, maybe the term is self-explanatory, but it's really that space of living our lives with integrity and responsibility for self and others. So notice I'm connecting across the different themes. We're caring for the environment, for our broader world. We're inviting God into meetings, into classrooms, into roommate debates, into political processes, whatever we are up to. And this comes up for me when I have opportunities to think about how my faith, how my commitment to being a contemplative in action, how that shows up at work. And so when I think about designing team conversations in a way that honors other people, when I create space for gratitude as a starting point inspired by the Examine, and when I pray before a feedback conversation or a coaching session in order to invite God into that time. So to me, those are examples of where I test or try accountability with God to co-create and to see what's possible there. So what might this require? Relationship with God, prayer, discernment, following the call. And kind of feels obvious to say that this is addressed in our CLA themes, but discernment, vocation, our contemplative spirituality, and more that keeps emerging on this. So accountability to community. When I'm truly co-creating with God, I am accountable to myself and to my community. So looking at this community layer next to get more examples. Accountability to community, meaning being respectful of and in service of others so that we're contributing to the common good. And this might involve accepting and offering criticism and feedback. It might involve taking responsibility for mistakes, for harm that's been caused. It likely involves being open to collaboration, to dialogue, and then honoring commitments and obligations so that we're living into a possibility of a life lived from accountability for others. So to honor commitments, it requires some clarity of commitments. To whom am I accountable? So I know, again, this was one of the pieces in pre-work we'll look at this in our second breakout group that'll come up in just a moment here. So this one really shows up in terms of looking at commitments and renegotiating where I need to. So an example that showed up recently for me is I'm in a training program to be a leadership coach. And as part of my class, I raised my hand and had an idea. Oh, what if we do this barter coaching so we all get some more practice together? And then somebody turned and said, sounds great, set it up. I guess I could probably do that. So I kind of walked away and, I thought, this is something I want to happen, but I didn't really agree to do it. So I went back and I renegotiated and I said, I can help with that. I need someone to do it with me, and I'll get it done before the end of May so that I could stay in my integrity to a commitment I'd made. I could give some clarity around what you could expect from me, and I could maintain some boundaries around other places that I have commitments, other things I've said I do. And oh my goodness, the places that we get to be called to be accountable to community can be so much messier than that. So many places that we get to be called to live in vulnerable action, being a stand for justice, being a voice for the environment, being a voice for people who are excluded and marginalized. So my renegotiating a timeline is a very small and tactical example, but there's so much that sits within this topic of accountability to community. So we've touched on it in servant leadership conversations, leading in complexity, and just listening. And there's so many more topics that follow after this one where we go a lot deeper.
Meg, I am so very grateful. You have given us so much to sit with and to carry with us, right? As we are just starting to explore accountability, and something that you did that you have the ability to do because you're a coordinator and part of this conversation on the throughout the whole 18 months is really draw connections to the other themes and to what's to come. So we're really grateful for that.